Hey, what's up guys? It's Thursday, so obviously we got a new video coming out for you, and this time we're covering the top 10 most powerful mutants in the Marvel Universe. And in the first proper list that we posted on this channel, we covered the top 10 most skilled martial artists in all of Marvel. And last time we did it, I had our boy Kev with us, and this time again to cover this topic, since he's our X-Men extraordinaire, we got Kev again.
Hey everyone, Kev here, back for another video for the channel.
Yeah, and like I said, we're covering the top 10 most powerful mutants in all of Marvel, and we're going to have a few criteria that we're going to follow for the list, and why don't you explain that to the people, Kev?
So before we get started here, there are some limitations that we are doing for this list. For one, we are not putting in mutants that are extremely powerful due to external forces. An example being the Phoenix Force, so that takes out most iterations of Jean Grey. This also includes Shadow King, because his original body that he took over was a mutant, but that does not qualify him for the list because the Shadow King is his own entity prior to fusing with the original. So only mutants that are as powerful as they are due to the potency of their X gene / mutant power. We have some honorable mentions. One of these honorable mentions being Apocalypse. Some will have issues with Apocalypse being lower than some of the people on this list. If this was Apocalypse when he was introduced into the Marvel Universe, then he would be in the top 10. But after the 90s, writers shifted from him being a physical monster with a massive intellect on mutant subjects and celestial technology, who could take on the likes of Magneto, Storm, and 10 other X-Men, as shown in the Marvel story The 12. But that is not the case anymore, and for the years to follow, he is written less impressively by writers, which gives him the issue of inconsistency. But even so, he is able to harm a young Thor, nearly punching his head off his shoulders, and even headbutting a young Thor with enough force to send shockwaves that travel for miles.
Yeah, Apocalypse is really portrayed, at least like you said, when he was introduced, as one of the most powerful mutants. One of the honorable mentions I brought in here was Iceman. This is a character that it might be weird seeing on a list of the most powerful mutants. At face value, all he can really do is manipulate ice, but he does have complete control over moisture in the entirety of the atmosphere, not just ice. This is to the point that he can reach absolute zero in basically an instant if he wanted to, and this extends to being capable of freezing over a nuclear reactor mid-explosion. So he's basically down to the molecule temp control. Probably one of his best feats, though it is a little bit vague, is freezing over hell. Considering the scale of hell that has been shown before in the Marvel Universe, we can get somewhat of an idea of the range of his powers, and it seems to be absolute as long as there's moisture in the atmosphere that he's within. Other great feats that he has is casually summoning mountains worth of ice, momentarily knocking back a weakened Juggernaut, who, if he was a mutant, would definitely make the list. He was even able to freeze over an entire celestial ship, and even doing damage to people that'll be later on the list.
And the next honorable mention I have for the list is Exodus, an absolute monster of a telekinetic, capable of straight up vaporizing living and non-living matter with his telekinesis, able to face off against multiple X-Men, some of which were top tier, such as Storm and Jean Grey, along with other mutants. His telekinesis is also able to reach down to the atomic level, showing so as he was able to reconstruct Charles Xavier's brain after Charles Xavier had taken a bullet straight through the head, and the brain being reduced to mush. Him describing it as restructuring it atom by atom.
And we're just in the honorable mentions already having characters that have molecular and atomic control of their abilities. And our last honorable mention doesn't necessarily have that, but that's Storm, Aurora Monroe. Now, she's often classified as an Omega-level mutant, and she has complete control over not only the Earth's atmosphere, but also the atmosphere of other planets, and can control the weather of any atmosphere that she's within, similar to Iceman. She's able to generate giant tornadoes that can hold back millions and even billions of gallons of water, coming out here in the form of giant tidal waves. And her powers don't just extend to the weather. She has superhuman sensory abilities to the point that she can see everything, not just in the conventional way, but she can also see patterns in energy. Her lightning's also some of the most potent in all of Marvel, to the point that it can power an entire planet, but she can also harm opponents in a more precise manner, which, for example, she can short out the electrical synapses within people's brains, and she's even done this to the likes of the Hulk, and is a fitting mutant to round out our honorable mention list.
And Storm is our last honorable mention on the list. As we go through the list, you may see that Franklin Richards will not be on the list. Quick reasoning, so that we don't have to talk about it later down the line, is that in recent comics, it is shown that he is not actually a mutant. He made himself into a mutant early on with his reality warping powers. But In recent issues, it was shown that he actually was not born a mutant, just a byproduct from his reality warping. And now, after that, we have, at number 10, Magneto. Being able to have complete control over the electromagnetic spectrum comes with its perks. Magneto is pretty nutty with what he's able to do, such as using his electromagnetism to yank the Worldbreaker bullet from several hundreds to thousands of light years to Earth in the span of 48 hours, which is incredibly fast considering the distance covered in that amount of time. He's been able to stop Thor's hammer with his electromagnetism a couple of times, which is a pretty insane feat, given what has been shown by Mjolnir. All of these, by the way, have been from Thor throwing it at him. In recent comics, he was able to finally manipulate living matter with his electromagnetism, which he has never done before. He's mostly done it with materials. He's been able to rearrange a living being down to the subatomic level, essentially atomizing them, but then reforming them, but without the weapons that they were threatening him with. He's been shown to take on multiple heroes at once, such as the X-Men, all the time throughout the decades. Many of those fights involving members that are on the honorably mentioned list, such as Iceman and Storm. He's also been shown to fight against Apocalypse before and winning in one of those fights. He's basically the cutoff point for most Earth-based mutants in terms of power. Most of the others will have feats that either completely destroy planets or just affect on a wider range compared to Magneto, who, sure, his electromagnetism can reach light years, but as we go through a list, you'll see how far their power range is.
Yeah, and kind of an example of how we're leaving Earth mostly for the rest of the list is our number 9, Vulcan. Now, Gabriel Summers himself doesn't have as many feats as some of the other characters that we have on the list, but what he has done definitely puts him comfortably at number 9, at least. I mean, Vulcan can absorb energy from basically any source and can redirect it and even create his own blast of energy. And though his first fight with the Eldest, which is a scryer alien race that can amp individuals by giving them their own life energy, he didn't end up so good at the end of that fight, but the second fight allowed him to absorb their energy completely outright, amping himself in order to take the Eldest out. And this is an energy being that was capable of taking out Gladiator, who is a Superman level threat. I mean, his energy manipulation is even so potent and focused that it can work on the energy that courses through the very body of an opponent, kind of similar to Storm. And this allows him to mentally dominate even some of the most powerful telepathic individuals like Rachel Gray, and can even suppress the powers of his brother Cyclops. This is even to the point where he can handle electron-based blasts from the likes of Black Bolt, who's another S-tier Superman-level fighter, and can even take a direct stream to the face, which did heavily damage him, but he was able to reform himself, which is not a feat that many people can perform throughout the entirety of the Marvel Universe.
But moving to number 8, we have Mr. M. Now, some people may have an issue with this one as well because he is not really shown to do that much, but the placements of the list are also influenced by the narrative perspective that they're put in through the Marvel Universe. Narratively speaking, he is supposed to be one of the most powerful mutants ever made, being portrayed as the next Messiah after the events of Decimation, when there was only 198 mutants left on the planet. His powers allow him straight subatomic manipulation, which not many other characters can do, and a lot of the people who could do similar either are outright reality manipulators, which, is kind of cheating. His mutant powers are unspecified, but from what's been presented, he is able to negate the powers of telepathy on his mind, doing so against Emma Frost, who in her own right is a very high-tier telepathic user in the Marvel Universe. He can reject death given some time. He was depowered by one of the mutants that survived the events of Decimation and took a straight bullet to the head, which ended up quote-unquote killing him. But later along the line in his publication, it was shown that it didn't actually kill him. He just ascended to a higher plane of existence, as implied by what the message is left behind in his final issue. There's not much else to say about him. He's a relatively short-lived character, although he is mentioned in recent comics, but other than that, he hasn't really done much. And the next choice also suffers from the similar issue of Mr. M.
Yeah, that's our number 7, Matthew Malloy, another mutant that lacks a lot of appearances, but I would say even to a further extent. Matthew Malloy only lasted about 6 to 7 issues. but he still shows enough, in our opinion, to make him at least the number 7 spot. From being able to pull in energy from a different dimension like Charles Xavier hypothesized he could, also able to completely bend the laws of physics to his whim, both within that dimension and on the plane of 616. I mean, his powers are so potent that even accidentally, he's capable of destroying an entire town along with all of its inhabitants. And he was able to completely manhandle a pretty large team of mutants. One-shotting the likes of Emma Frost, just like our last pick, Mr. M, defeating Exodus, one of our honorable mentions, mentally. And Kev already explained how that's an insane feat. He's also defeated number 10 Magneto, along with the entirety of the X-Men around him at the time. He's even strong enough to raise himself from the dead, which is something that's really only reality warpers are generally able to do in the Marvel Universe. And it's something that Mr. M, our previous placement, almost failed to do in a way, but as you said, he did rise to that higher plane of existence. And our last 2 placements, as we said, have abilities that are kind of akin to straight-up reality warpers, but we don't really get into straight-up reality warping until our next placement.
Yeah, very much so. At number 6, we have Proteus. His power is just straight-up reality manipulation. His range is much farther than the previous entry, being able to reach across the world. He was able to manipulate the planet to such a degree that he converted it to an area of geometry, which sounds complicated, but let me explain. He essentially turned the planet into a digital-esque flatland with shapes around it and on a grid. The best description I could give you that is, imagine a sheet of paper, the grid sheet paper you'd have in school, and just placing a whole bunch of random shapes on it. And now imagine that, but on a 3D scale, and that's what he did to the entire planet. Though his issue with his reality manipulation is that he needs to focus on it in order for it to take into effect, and he has to keep his focus on it, or else it will go back to what it originally was. Though that's not all he's done that puts him this high up on the list. Proteus has been able to take on Phoenix Jean Grey, who was actively trying to either kill him or at minimum just knock him out. But he was able to resist the powers and just straight casually one-shot her with the raising of his hand.
That's an absolutely insane feat considering the way that Jean Grey is portrayed, especially when she's full-on possessed by the Phoenix. And the mutants are capable of taking down high-scale entities doesn't end from there with our number 5 Onslaught. Now, this might be a bit of a controversial placement. Some people don't consider him a mutant, but considering Marvel has officially claimed him as so, we're just going to go with that. Onslaught has the mutant ability to absorb the other abilities of mutants. As a baseline, he already contains the mutant powers of both Charles Xavier and Magneto. So obviously most of what we mentioned for Magneto is going to apply directly to Onslaught as well, but it's even shown that Onslaught was able to do even more damage with the electromagnetic spectrum than Magneto could at the time. And his powers of absorption are so potent that he's even able to absorb Franklin Richards. We mentioned him at the top of the list. He would definitely at least be in our top 5, if not higher, if he was considered a mutant still. But Onslaught was able to completely absorb him, as well as Nate Grey. He was also able to manipulate the astral plane to his will, even to the point of where he could also overpower Jean Grey, Charles Xavier, and even, as I mentioned, Nate Grey. But this was already in the process of Nate Grey being absorbed. And speaking of Nate Grey, our next placement, Kev, if you want to take that away.
Yeah, at number 4, we've got Nate Grey, one of the poster boys of powerful mutants. Mostly known as X-Man, he was able to connect the minds of the same person through multiple different universes, which is something that we've never seen before, at this scale at least. Now, Nate Grey is known for being a powerful psion user, which entails that he can use his mind for a lot of different powers, not just telepathy. With his TK, he was able to manipulate the Earth's gravitational pull by isolating it just within a certain area to blast 2 entities into space. He could actually harm Thanos by unleashing the full might of the energy in his TK Psi armor, which Thanos by himself has taken a lot of hits throughout his publications and come out unscathed, such as taking hits from Thor and actively asking for Thor to continue hitting him, whether it be with his hammer or with his lightning. And Thor is an outright planet buster, so that tells you a lot about what Nate Grey can do with his TK. The TK Psi armor, as previously mentioned, can also grant him stats that rival those of the Hulk. He can also take attacks from Kabiri, who is able to bust planets with his blasts as well. Nate could also manipulate time down to the Planck length. The reason we have Nate Gray above Onslaught on the list is because Onslaught was struggling with Nate Gray pre-Shaman, which is just a later iteration of Nate Gray. But for the list, we are talking about Nate in his entire publication, which includes Shaman, a vastly more powerful version of the version Onslaught was up against during the Onslaught saga.
And moving on from that, we are moving into the top 3 most powerful mutants in all of Marvel, and we're starting with Jamie Braddock, aka the Monarch. Now this is going to be our first full-scale reality warper on the list, but does so a little bit differently than people we've seen previously on the list. Jamie's power allows him to manipulate the quantum strings that comprise reality itself. And by messing with these quote-unquote strings, he can theoretically destroy all of creation. I mean, that is a little bit speculative, but it's kind of coming from what the basis of his powers are. And with his power, he could even grant resistances to other people, as he did with a character called Betsy, giving her resistance of telepathy to the level of the Shadow King, which Kev already explained how impressive the Shadow King is. Not only that, but allowing people to resist the reality warping powers of a previous character on the list, Proteus. And his powers are potent to the point of allowing him to enter the White Hot Room, and this is connected directly to the Phoenix Force, so only people that can enter that way or via death, since that's where all people who die must go through at some point, but he can just enter it at will. He was even able to take over an entire alternate universe after establishing a connection that the reality's own high-tier reality manipulators could do basically nothing against him. So he has feats of outright defeating groups of other reality manipulators. And his manipulation even extends to the point of magic, where he can manipulate magic strings and cast spells without even having to learn them. This was to the point that he could reverse magic from the likes of Morgan Le Fay, who is one of the top tier sorceresses in all of Marvel. And speaking of that, next week we will be covering the top 10 magic users in all of Marvel, so definitely check that out next Thursday. He can even track the likes of Black Widow, even when she was in the possession of the Infinity Gems. This shows that he not only has reality manipulation, but also senses on a universal scale. So this is not only one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel Universe, but one of the most powerful reality warpers full stop in the Marvel Universe. But obviously, since we're in the upper echelon of this list, there are reality manipulators in the Marvel Universe that are above Jamie, namely our number 2, Mad Jim Jaspers. Now this is an absolute jokester of a man. He's able to manipulate all of reality similar to Jamie, being regarded as even more powerful than his already busted alternate version from Earth 238. This is a character who could manipulate the entire universe at will.
Yeah, so with that already in mind, he already stands in the upper echelon, narratively speaking. Described as being the creator of everything within the universe, which might be a lie or an exaggeration of what he can do, but I wouldn't completely put it past him. Considering how high of a pedestal Marvel puts him, he was able to manipulate all of reality in the present and the past regarding Captain Britain's life through the entire Marvel 616 timeline, which is a crazy feat considering this includes all possible timelines that can happen and all possible timelines that have already branched out from the main 616 timeline. Other than that, he is currently residing in one of the alternate realities connected to Otherworld, where he has complete control and dominion over it.
Yeah, and this is the first character that we've really seen perform feats on a multiversal scale, or at least multi-timeline scale. But that very fact almost emphasizes the power of our number 1 pick, who has plenty of showings on that level, and that would be Legion.
And now we're at the number 1 on the list. The lad himself has the ability to generate new powers at will, which have granted him powers that put him at the top of the list. This may seem like cheating, but this is his mutant power, and it does not count as an external force, as some would argue. He has multiple powers that can warp reality, such as the Origami Master, who could fold pieces of reality on itself. He could create a concentrated psi field that could keep out any form of telepathy, which Charles Xavier couldn't even penetrate, and we already know Charles Xavier is arguably the strongest telepathy user in the Marvel Universe. Legion could compress the entire 616 universe into a box while replacing it with a small pocket reality that held all of the mutants and continuously generated living soldiers for them to fight against, which lasted about a week. What he could also do is he could also look at the entirety of every possible outcome, timeline, and alternate universe in the multiverse, which is a ridiculous feat compared to everything else that we have seen on the list, and he was able to do so within a minute. Finally, and this is the craziest one, he was able to remove himself from everywhere in the entire Marvel timeline and the entire multiverse. For about a decade, this feat would be seen as the absolute pinnacle of what a Marvel mutant could do.
But despite the fact that it was retconned, it's still definitely accurate, in my opinion, to the portrayal of what the pinnacle of Marvel mutants could achieve, which obviously, in our opinion, is Legion. No, like I said, no other character has had multiversal feats on this scale. So without a doubt, 100%, we definitely think Legion. So yeah, that's our list. If we missed out any Omega level mutants, definitely put them down in the comments. Give this video a like, comment, all the good YouTube stuff. Kev, did you have anything else to say on the list before we head out?
Follow us on all other media outlets such as Instagram, TikTok, and obviously YouTube channel, and eventual Twitch channel when we get around to that.
Yeah, and we'll be at Big Battle Boys on every other platform besides YouTube, so give us a shout. We're nearing 1,000 followers on TikTok, so definitely try to get us there. Give us a follow. Like every single video. But until then, that's all we had to say on the topic, so thanks for covering this with me today, Kev.
No problem, man. I love mutants, and I hope that we can make another video based on them.
All right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.